Good morning, everybody. I'd like to get ahead of a few questions that I'm usually asked at our season-ending press conference. I'll start with the chairman. He's not here today. Still very much involved with the Boston Bruins and, of course, chairman of the National Hockey League. He sends his regards and has empowered myself and the three gentlemen to my left to run the day-to-day operations of the Boston Bruins and the roster. I want to also mention that the three gentlemen to my left have my complete confidence. We have no expectation of personnel changes coming during this upcoming off season. I also would very much like to thank Jack Edwards for his 19 years of being the voice of the Boston Bruins. It was bittersweet, but very much hold high in regard for Jack and what he's done on behalf of the franchise and how he's brought hockey to the fans of New England. And finally, I'd like to thank all of our associates here at the TD Garden and the Boston Bruins for their wonderful efforts in helping us celebrate the Boston Bruins centennial season. This was a massive undertaking involving everybody from the front office and myself all the way down to our summer interns. And I feel very proud of how we presented our brand here, not only in Boston, but I believe that we have paved the way for those franchises, those other franchises, US-based franchises that will be turning 100 years old in the months and years to come. Thank you. I'm going to hand this over to Cam.
Thanks, Charlie. I too want to echo how great the centennial season went off as far as all the air nights. I want to thank the alumni for coming back to Boston. A lot of them traveled great distances to be here. It's exciting to see the alumni. I know our current players really enjoyed the various alumni that came through Boston this year. I certainly want to thank our fans. We have the best fans in the league, and they bring it every night, so good on them. And I know I do a really good job of hiding my emotions, so I do want to say I'm a little disappointed still that we're not playing, but I'm excited about the off season, excited about next season. I think we saw some area of growth from players that we didn't expect to this year, which is encouraging for us. So like I said, still a little disappointed we're not playing, but excited about next year. Don?
Thanks, Cam. I think everybody knows I have twin boys, so I kind of look at things as in twos that way. Really appreciative of the organization and everybody involved, whether, you know, obviously Mr. Jacobs, Cam, Charlie, all throughout the year of how we went about to put on a centennial season. And I get a chance to be around the players and how receptive they were to handle a lot of going on behind the scenes with a lot of change. And I think our players, with new leadership, accepted those challenges, embraced those challenges, and carried it forward on the ice for a very, very productive, rewarding season. The twin side, the evil twin side of me says, with Cam sitting next, that, you know, we're bitterly disappointed that we did not push this to the very least to a Game 7, to extend that series, to continue to challenge for what our ultimate goal is, and it's to win at the most important time of the year. We put together a team that was very, very competitive the regular season. We fell short in the playoffs in some areas that certainly this summer we need to continue to address. Again, I'm proud of the leadership. It was a bit of a passing of the torch for our players, and I'm excited for the core group of guys as they continue to move forward and carry this franchise forward.
I would say I'm very grateful to be a part of the Boston Bruins because of the three gentlemen to my right, their leadership, their vision, and their commitment to excellence, which allows the communication, not only with them, but the players, I think, which makes being part of the Bruins special. When I look at the season, I echo all the sentiments that they've made, and what excites me about the potential of next year is the growth and the experience that our captain, Brad Marchand's going to have to grow as a captain, because he made it his team. and having all summer to build relationships with his core leaders, I think is going to only make us better, and he will continue to grow in that capacity. The many players that establish themselves as core pieces and or becoming Bruins, and the potential growth that they have within their roles and their individual growth to help the Bruins be better, and the opportunity ahead of us.
Thank you, guys. We'll now open for questions. Again, I ask that you wait for the wireless mic, state your name and affiliation, and who your question is directed toward.
Scoring was an issue off and on all season, and it really kind of sunk you in the playoff series against the Panthers. How do you plan on going about addressing that? Do you target centermen? Do you target wings? What's your approach there?
You're right. It reared its head at the most inopportune time, that we weren't able to finish in quality chances, and in some cases, guys that generally do finish in quality situations of that nature. I think at the onset of the season, what I tried to communicate with the staff was I felt that our group would score enough goals during the course of the season. I didn't think we'd be dominant offensively based on the players that had exited our franchise and retired and moved on. But we sort of set thresholds that we knew we needed to meet. And I thought with guys coming in and providing a secondary offense, we did a really good job during the regular season. Now, did it manifest itself in the playoffs and our power play, certainly in the Florida series, went too dormant at important times and moments? Yeah, and we need to fix and address that, whether that's personnel, systematically. These guys work hard every day to try and find the nuances that will shift that. The margins are small. They just are. I mean, the final 3 games of the series were 3-2, 2-1, 1-2. So, at the end of the day, the other team's having difficulty to score. As teams move through the playoffs, things tighten up. You have to find a way. We didn't get inside quite enough in rebound situations that we might have been able to take advantage of. So there are some things that we need to address, and I need to address from a standpoint of free agency and or internal growth. I think Coyle, Zaka, a bunch of guys were able to step forward, and they were cast as a little bit of misfits in that regard. We didn't see it in that way, and I think they stepped forward, and several other guys did too. We have to complement. I have to be able to find some players that can come in and provide secondary scoring for us, at key opportune times.
Jim McBride, Boston Globe. Cam, this is for you. You mentioned production from some players that you weren't expecting. I'm wondering if you can be more specific, and are you talking about the rookies there?
Yeah, in particular, I don't think we expected Mason Lohrei to step in and play as many games as he did. Same with Johnny Beecher, came in and stole a job at camp. We weren't expecting him to take a job at camp, so that was a good surprise for us. So those two in particular I was thinking about.
Go ahead.
Kevin Dupont, Boston Globe. Cam, I look at these for the 4 teams now we're in the conference finals. It looks to me like they're faster and they play harder. I'm wondering if you agree with that. If you do, how does that get addressed?
Well, Don and I have had a lot of conversations since the season's ended, and certainly we talk every day during the season. We talk about how we want our team to play. A lot of it's personnel, obviously. This game is fast. We're not as fast as we like to be. Some of that had to do with last off season, what we were really kind of hamstrung into trying to accomplish. And I think Don and our pro staff did a really good job last off season and built a team that competed the way they did. But there's areas where we still need to improve that, and we're going to address that this off season for sure. But yeah, we need to get a little faster, and we got to. I like to see a little bit more 50-50 puck battle wins, and that's an area where it's just you have to want the puck more than the other team.
Haggerty, Boston Sports Journal. This question's for Don. Obviously, you're going to have a lot more cap space this summer. Can you just talk about the potential that provides, and also maybe some of the priorities as far as using that cap space and utilizing it to go get some players?
Yeah, we are in a situation where we can we can look to add to our core group of guys, and that includes also some of the younger guys, as Cam mentioned. I think Matty Poitras is another one that we're going to hopefully come back as he's healthy next year and see what he's capable of doing moving forward. He has to come back in and earn a spot like all of our young players and even incumbent returnee players, and how much they can push the group internally. But we're going to be aggressive, to be able to complement what we currently have in some areas. Our team played hard. To Kevin's point of whether or not we can play faster or whether or not we can find players that will, create more anxiety in the forecheck and some of the situations that, certainly you look at the teams that are still playing, they do a really good job of that. And pockets of time we did. Otherwise, we wouldn't have still been playing. The teams that are still playing are damn good, and they've earned the right to be there, and we didn't. It's hard to get in, and it's hard to continue to win, but I've got to find the players that complement our current group and push us forward.
Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please signal for the wireless mic.
Don or Cam, whoever wants to answer this. A lot of change on the roster this year, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to Jim's ability to mold new guys as well as younger players to the existing roster and make it work.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy's a strong communicator. So when you're adding the players that we did and coming in and having a new captain, I think it's one of the strengths of his coaching ability to unite players of that sort. To clearly identify the areas that we're looking for our group to carry forward. If that's puck possession, if that's the ability to generate, ability to break out, and continue hammering home on those ideals and structure, playing within structure. I think that's a really fundamental part of what we try to do as an organization is bring players in here that fit into that, but can push us forward. And in several instances, Kevin Shattenkirk, for all the right reasons we brought in, our power play went dormant for a little bit. He steps in that role. He steps up in as our players acknowledged, in a leadership fashion in Game 7 before Game 7 to talk about his experiences. And JVR and Danton Heinen playing in roles that, Monty gave him confidence to play in. But it's also allowing the younger players to hopefully feel like they're not boxed out. They get opportunity, they make a team. They might have some setbacks, and communication is a big part of the readdressing those needs. And Johnny Beecher went through that this year. And, again, it's the strength of our staff overall, and Jimmy leads that to clearly identify where the roles are and where our needs are as a group. And I think communication is a big part of that.
Don, Matt Votor, Mass Live. Jeremy talked a lot during the season about how the arbitration process affected him. He said after the season he thought that you guys were on a pretty good path toward a long-term contract. Can you speak to where that process is and how much is that a priority to get him locked up long-term, especially after the postseason he had?
Well, it's clearly a priority, and Jeremy knows, I've told him this. He took us to arbitration, just for clarity's sake. And again, that part of it, no different than Trent Frederick and being there and being able to settle. Sometimes those things happen in the course of business, and it's not an indication of whether or not we didn't believe in Jeremy Swayman, whether or not we don't think he's a big part of our future. We clearly engaged in conversation during the regular season to find a longer-term extension. We haven't gotten there yet. It's a priority now. It'll continue to be a priority until we get that across the finish line. He's a big part of our current team and the run that he went on in the playoffs and our future. And our goaltending is arguably one of the best tandems in the National Hockey League, and they proved it during the course of this season. They put us in a situation most nights to have an opportunity to win, but the priority will be to find a landing spot with Jeremy.
Mick Colagio, Rink Rep Blog. This is kind of Donnie / Jim. Charlie McAvoy is kind of a targeted player in the playoffs by teams trying to be over the line physical on him and try to disrupt the Bruins breakout by breaking him down. How do you see, Lowry really played well at times with him, and I'm wondering if you feel like you found his partner going forward. Somebody that if you identified Lowry as that guy, are you thinking more a physical player to play with Charlie, because that's went that way at the end of the series? Just wondering what your thoughts are on what kind of partner Charlie functions best with, and because It seems at times like, he gets drawn into trying to be Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermeyer, which, as you know, as a defenseman, Donnie, is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, I think that, part of your question, Charlie McAvoy wanting to be and having the ability to be Scott Niedermeyer and Scott Stevens is why he's so valuable and so talented, and that's why I think he can mix and match with a lot of people. As far as who's going to be his partner next year, I think it's a little premature to be looking at that. Whether it's Lowride, Lindholm, those things will work itself out, once the roster is more complete coming towards training camp. We'll have a better idea.
I can follow up with that. I played a long time with Raymond. The other team targeted Ray Bork every goddamn night. Like, let's be honest. That's what happens, in the playoffs. They know what key components of other rosters are, and they're going to try and attack them. And that's an opportunity for other players to either step forward but Charlie embraces that opportunity to play against best players and to hopefully stare it down. And that's a continued evolution. Pasta faces, arguably the hardest matchups that he's gonna place. That's what the playoffs are. And we're trying to do the exact same thing on the other side of it. In Toronto's case, we persevered, and against Florida, we fell short. That's why we're not playing, and we need to continue to do a better job in that regard.
This is for both Cam and Don. Ty Anderson, 95 Sports Hub. Linus Ullmark has made it pretty clear that he loves being here, and if he has his say, he wants to stay here. Is it feasible? Is it realistic to have potentially 12 mil, 13 mil in goaltending, given the needs and the aggressiveness that you've talked about displaying in other positions this summer?
Well, I appreciate you negotiating for Jeremy in terms of doing the math, reverse engineering of math. But again, those things will take care of themselves. No conversation I'm going to have, with a player in terms of what we're trying to do until we have to have a conversation is really going to get public. And I hope you all respect that, because ultimately that's what a player, as a former player, I would hope would happen. We're going to find a landing spot with Jeremy Swayman, and if we can make the math work, we're going to have the best tandem. If we can't, we're going to explore, or Linus, may come to us and change his mind. That may occur as well. Right now, he's really happy. We were very happy to sign Linus, and in a perfect world, we would keep the tandem, because I think it's damn good. But we're going to explore opportunities. My phone's going to ring. I'm going to make calls. That's just what the job requires. And fortunately, at times, unfortunately, things start to leak out. And that's your job. You guys do a hell of a job of figuring those things out, of piecing together. Some guys are really wrong, but it doesn't stop you from throwing it out there, and that's okay. It's good for the business overall. It's good for hockey in terms of drawing attention and eyes to it. So I understand it.
Sophia Yurkshevich, Nesson, this question is for Don Sweeney. We asked Jim about the leadership and the role that Brad Marchand had in his first year as captain a lot this season. So I'm just curious about your take. He himself admitted that it was a lot more responsibility than he thought at the beginning, and felt pleased with his first year. How did you feel Brad did as a captain the first year, and did you notice anyone else emerge as that co-captain? Patrice had Brad, Chara had Patrice. Did you notice other players emerging into those leadership roles? Thank you.
Everybody knows Brad's personality. He's going to look to embrace everything and shoulder everything he possibly can. I think, Cam and I, Jimmy, we all tried to have conversations with Brad and saying, you're not doing this alone in any way, shape, or form. You're anointed as our leader. He sets the tone in practice every day. Everything is sort of amplified with Brad, which is such a positive attribute of his. He had resources to be able to tap into, with Patrice and other leaders that he's learned from. But he has to be his own person, and he had to navigate that on his own to some degree. But we had a lot of good conversations about, or he would ask, just in terms of more tone of things and what direction, he ultimately wanted to take his team. Now, he's not doing it alone, and David and Charlie and other people, we have a leadership group. Brandon Carlo, we have a leadership group that does a hell of a job to support those efforts. And publicly, they've acknowledged that the culture in that room is an extension, obviously, of what was formerly created, but it's continued. And other players that are coming in, Pat Maroon speaking glowingly of walking into that room and being welcome. Andrew Peak being welcome. Shattenkirk standing up in the game 7 and feeling empowered to be able to make that. It wasn't just Brad making that speech. That's indicative of a guy who's growing into leadership. You know, not feeling like he has to suffocate the room, that it's an extension of what he's trying to accomplish as a leader himself.
Fudo Shinzawa, The Athletic. One for Don and one for Jim. First, logistically, can you go to arbitration again with Jeremy again this summer?
Yep.
You can, okay.
I don't plan on it, but again, he might file, and that's how that's how the system works. But you know,
It could
the
happen.
answer to the question is yes.
Okay. Just in general about the goalie trade market, you don't see number ones being moved that often, but when they do, the return is not commensurate to a high-end skater. Why is that generally around the league? That precedent usually says that the return isn't so good for a number one goalie.
I mean, I would disagree. I think that goaltenders trade hands, you know, in a draft scenario. I think it went for 9 overall one year. So it's really about what the market, you know, other teams need and what the market will bear. Ultimately, it comes down to supply and demand, and what another team wants and what you might have. Ultimately, that generally shapes the trade market. There isn't a lot of goaltenders that exchange, so it's a small sample size to begin with. But, you know, arguably, they change, and what other teams need will set the return.
And then one for Jim. You had mentioned before Game 7, speaking to Mike Babcock, what has that relationship been like for you? Just how helpful that has been, that he was able to lend you support before that Toronto Game 7?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not only Mike Babcock. I remember calling before Game 5, calling Harry Sinden, who I communicate with quite frequently because of, you know, how much the Bruins mean, how much he means to Bruins history. You know, and whether it's Scotty Bowman or it's Craig Berube, like, I like to reach out to a lot of different people because there might be something they say that really connects or jars me that will allow me to be better and hence the team to grow. I think it's something that will help the Bruins. And that's why I make those phone calls, because when you're just communicating with someone that has been through it all and has seen it all, I think a lot of times you forget, because they're not in the moment, you are in the moment. And when you're in the moment, sometimes it's hard to see outside of the box, and they help you see outside of the box.
Kevin Dupont from the Globe. First for Donnie and then Charlie. Don, just housekeeping stuff here. Of the free agents, have you told any of them that you're just moving on?
I've had conversations with all of our impending free agents, giving them an indication of where we're leading, but we haven't made any final concrete decisions. Just telling them, we have upcoming meetings that we have to go through and put the jigsaw puzzle together as we see it, and how aggressive we're going to be. But I've indicated to some players the likely direction, but nothing definitive.
Okay. And also, anybody headed for surgery?
No, thankfully at this time we don't have anybody. We have some follow-up stuff that a couple players need, but we don't have anybody on the docket.
Okay. Cam, you perked up like you're having surgery. No?
Eventually.
Charlie, I want to make sure I didn't miss an important nuance here. When you talked about your dad, you said, lack of a better word here, the four of you are empowered to make decisions. Is that any change? Because that's how I've always understood it.
No, I just wanted to get ahead of any potential questions regarding that. It seems to be when we have an end-of-season presser, there's always that question. I just wanted to get ahead of it. No change.
And also, in the vein of no change, you've had 5 straight years here of first or second round knockouts. You're not making any personnel changes. So from your perspective, what changes it?
Well, hold on. There was a change. We let go of our coach, and we have a new one sitting here. There's unfortunately a second exit, a little further this year than last year, but we have had change, Kevin.
I understand that, but I'm talking today.
I'm not sure I understand. Could you specify?
You've had 5 straight first and second round changes. You say it's status quo going into this season. I'm asking you, what changes it? What gets you beyond first and second round knockouts?
Well, I would leave that up to the gentleman, the 3 to my left. I wanted to, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, they have my utmost confidence. I feel like we haven't necessarily found our ceiling yet in terms of the opportunity of this team. I believe in them to find that ceiling, and hence they have my confidence, and therefore no change. I don't foresee a change in these personnel for this upcoming season.
Any personnel?
Well, I can't speak for the people that report to Cam and Don, or Monty for that matter, but no, not from where I sit.
So I'll follow up there. Jim, from your perspective, any changes, coaching staff?
Again, we haven't finished all of our revision of last year, but as it stands right now, there is no imminent changes in our mind.
Emily Benjamin, NHL.com. Don, I just wanted to check in on two players. Jake DeBrusk expressed some disappointment at nothing being able to be figured out yet contract-wise. Do you see a path forward with Jake?
Again, negotiations are a two-way street. We took an aggressive position with Jake, no different than the other players that have chosen not to re-sign and explore. That's within his right, certainly at this time of the year. Do I see a path? Yeah, there's a path, and I told him that at our exits, that he's been a big part of our group. He elevated in the playoffs, and I would prefer to have Jake DeBrusk on our team, but he has some opportunity in front of him that he may pursue otherwise. So I don't have a clear answer for you today, but I know the position we've taken. We feel very comfortable, but it didn't get it to the finish line either.
And then just on Brad, he has one more year. What kind of a priority would it be to start talking to him in July?
Yeah, we're going to get to Brad. He's learning patience as a captain as well. So, maybe he has to learn that there's some ducks in a row as he advocates in terms of adding to our group and how excited he was to add to that those guys don't have contracts that I'm going to add, and eventually he'll extend here and remain, in my opinion, a lifelong Bruin, because that's what he should do. But we'll check that box appropriately as well.
Scott McLaughlin, WEI. This is for Jim. After Game 6, you said it was too early to reflect on any changes you would have liked to have made. Now, a little bit removed, are there changes you wish you had made, whether playoffs or even during the season?
I felt, throughout the year when we had or faced adversity because the outcomes weren't what we would like, I do think we made changes that made us better. I think if you look at, the expected goals for halfway through the year, at the end of the year, expected goals against halfway through the year, at the end of the year, they're really indicative of, if your team's progressing or not. And we did progress in both those areas. So offensively and defensively, we felt as a group that our team identity changed, and that was, the communication I talk about that comes, from these gentlemen here to my right, but also from the leadership core to me and the staff, identifying how we can get better. And I think we did a lot of that. I think if you look within the series too, both series, we continued to get better within the series. So would I say we would do anything different? Well, maybe we could have made those things that we recognized that allowed us to get better to do it a game earlier. But at the same time, things come and you don't want to make changes just to make changes. That sometimes is a lack of patience and a lack of belief in what you're trying to do and how you're doing it. So that's a long-winded question to say that we're really happy with a lot of what we did, and we have to continue to get better. Whether it's creating offense or creating more turnovers defensively, especially in the offensive and neutral zone, not so much the defensive zone. Those are things we're going to continue to look at.
Mark Capello, 98.5, The Sports Hub. I guess this would be for Cam, Donnie, or Monty. The last couple of years, or last few years, you guys have real problems winning home games. You had a problem this year with Florida. You lost 3 of the 4 games. Why is that?
It's really hard to say, to be honest with you. I mean, I think across the league this year in playoffs, maybe the home team is maybe under 500. So I don't know if it's particularly a Bruins issue, but it's something that we certainly want to talk about this offseason, because when you get into this building as a player, you know it's going to be cranking. And our fans, like I said earlier, brought it every night. And it's something where I think, you know, when you're at home as a player, you really want to perform well, and you probably put a little bit too much pressure on yourself, as opposed to on the road. You know, you just go out and play the game. So that's just from a player's perspective. I think maybe sometimes you put a little too much pressure on yourself to perform your best at home.
Joe Haggerty, Boston Sports Journalist, for Cam and Donnie. 7 too many ice penalties during the playoffs. Just wondering your thoughts and view on that. Was it all sort of circumstantial game situation type stuff, or was there something that, you know, needs to be improved going into next year?
Well, I mean, 7 is a lot. There's no question. You've got to kill off 14 minutes of penalties that you shouldn't be taking. I mean, 1 or 2 you can understand, but there's clearly some miscommunication, whether it's you know, players not prepared to jump or jumping too early, guys coming to the bench and then not getting on the bench. I think there was one in particular where Brandon came out of the penalty box, so I think a defenseman thought it was his change because Brandon was a defenseman, but I think it was a forward that needed to go. So there's different reasons for it to happen, but 7 is way too many to have happen. There's no question about it.
Mick Claudio, Rink Rat Blog for Jim. The face-off game, post-Bergeron, post-Krejci, obviously was going to be somewhat of a challenge, especially those left-handed D-zone draws in that right-wing circle. You guys won a lot of games getting outshot. You won a lot of games getting out one on the face-off dot. And I'm wondering from your angle how you perceive all of that. As far as what you did to mitigate it, is that more important than whether or not you're good in those particular stats?
You know, the shot clock, ever since I started being a head coach, is something that I never put much emphasis on. You know, if you're not generating enough scoring chances or giving up too many scoring chances, that's where we really get concerned. You know, and at times in the playoffs, we weren't generating enough scoring chances. And that's the concerning part, and where we tried to continue to get better throughout a series. When it comes to face-offs in particular, I think that when you lose the centerman that we lost that took so many important face-offs, I think that, you know, the other centerman that we lost to, they were all over 53%. Nosek. And they were all old. They all had many years in the league. Face-offs, you continue, if you watch, if you look at Crosby's first 3 years and you look at his face-off percentage the last 3 years, it's a learned art. And I only expect our group to continue to get better at the tricks of the trade of how to win face-offs, how to communicate better with the people that are on the ice with you, to understand where for a lack of, but this is the term we use, is when a centerman's taking a draw against a certain other-handed face-off, there's a spray that's going to go whether you win or lose. And being able to communicate those guys to anticipate a little bit more is somewhere where we need to continue to grow as a team. And win or lose, be able to create possession off a win or a loss more often than we did this year is part of our team growth for next year.
For Don and Jim, Pat Maroon has won 3 Stanley Cups, but he said his time here, he put it high on his hockey resume. Do you see a path forward for a guy like that? And Jim, how much did he affect your team in the short time that he was here?
I think Pat was really instrumental for that second voice or third voice, especially on the bench, especially in moments. And I think I've talked about it, and other players talked about it, you know, in the face of adversity. He had he has a lot of special qualities that give confidence to players, that we can or we will attitude. So he was important in a lot of facets to our team.
Yeah, I mean, the intention obviously was to bring on, winning experience in key moments and a voice of reason that he's able to calm things down. He does, despite the role and his ability to diffuse some things. Health will be probably the paramount thing that we factor in, with Pat moving forward.
Anybody else? All right, well, thanks again to everyone for attending. Our department will be in touch in the coming days with some key off-season dates and upcoming availabilities. Wish everyone a great day and the rest of your week. Thanks again.